When I first got into houseplants, I followed every rule that was out there. So you know what? I watered once a week. I never repotted in winter. I made sure to use the exact kind of houseplant soil that you can get in every plant store out there. And my plants still struggled, and I still had a lot of plant death. The biggest turning point for me was actually not just looking at rules, but actually going with what I was seeing and being able to understand the signals that the plants themselves were giving me. Hi, my name is Memo, this is my channel, Houseplantygoodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion. You might be able to see some of it behind me, it's tropical houseplants. So yes, I think a lot of us when we're first starting off are very much like, these are the rules and we can't deviate from them too much, but I'm doing everything right and I still don't have a green thumb. What am I doing wrong? Part of that is the fact that we're all blindly following some arbitrary rules that the plant growers, kind of old school myths and kind of sayings have left with us, and not actually paying attention as to what is happening with the plants. And this is normal because we're going into something new without realizing anything about it, and we're trying to get whatever information we can in the beginning. So in this video, I'm going to talk about some mistakes that I made along the way and have made me better at plant care, why set plant care advice can only ever take you that far, and how to start recognizing some patterns and some communications that from your plants to you as to maybe what might be going right or wrong. But let's talk about the beginning stage. And this is a point where we all start off. Even people that have been around plants for most of their lives and they've been around maybe friends, family that have been growing plants all their time, which is the beginner stage where the rules are king. You follow every single rule to the T. So I'm talking about set water schedules, and we've discussed about how sometimes that could work, but I'm talking about blindly following somebody's watering schedule, or you get a plant from a store and it says you need to water it every week. What are you doing? You're watering it every week because the label on the plant told you to do so. A bit of a spoiler and a bit of a tip from all of us that have been doing this for a while. Whatever label comes with the plant, look at it, acknowledge it, take it off, put it in the bin. Do better. I know, it's scary. I know it's scary, but hopefully this video will help you. By the end of this video, you should be able to understand a bit more what you should do instead of just blindly following some rules. And this is why I said, even if you've been around friends and family and parents that have always had rules, rules that they have had for their plants with their care in their conditions over decades have been distilled to something very specific. And this is something that I encourage you to think about. Even the people like all of us that have been doing this for a while, if you had a newbie stand right next to you right now and just say, give me your knowledge. I want to know rules. And they forced it and they said, look, I want you to actually tell me rules. You would give them the rules that worked for you. That's decades of experience, learnings, understanding what your plants are going to have, and you're distilling it into some very simple rules for somebody, unless you want to overwhelm them, and most of us wouldn't want to do that because you'd see everybody's eyes glaze over. But at the same time, all of us that have been doing this for a while would know that if you're just giving those rules, that's only scratching the surface, because decades of experience know that those rules are never set in stone. Even your own rules that you've gathered over the decades, you've had that decade's worth of experience to just kind of go, oh yes, this is what I would normally do. And I know that by and large this works, but this plant is not responding to this way. So that rule is immediately put to the side, and I need to maybe apply a different rule to this one because this is reacting differently. That newbie cannot make that connection yet. They don't have that life experience yet. So again, being very careful with strict plant advice. If you're just starting off, even if you're not just starting off as well, and you've always followed the rules and you might have thought about it recently and just gone, I've always done this because I've been told to do this, but my plants aren't doing so great. Why? Strict rules, never follow strict rules. There needs to be flexibility for everything that we do. Anybody that's been doing this for a long period of time will tell you that rules are never set in stone. And then the internet contradictions of it all. And this might be a bit of a spoiler for people that are just starting off. And again, this is not me trying to panic you, but maybe this is me trying to educate you in something that we've all learned over the years as well, which is there's going to be a lot of internet contradictions. And it boils down to a whole bunch of things. And it's never generally malicious in its intent. So a lot of the times what you're getting as, if you search for something online, you are going to be getting the care advice that every single retailer of that exact plant is going to be providing you. A lot of the times, because they have to get in hundreds of plants each month and sell hundreds of plants each month, they aren't going to sit there and individually go, oh yes, I have grown all 100 of these plants and I'm getting every single week, and they're different 100 plants every single week. So I know from experience that this and this and this is going to happen. No, they're going to just copy and paste whatever the grower has provided them as care instructions and put that on there. So that's the first issue, because remember what I said about taking the label and putting it in the bin? Same thing is going to happen with a lot of the retailers' websites. Again, not malicious, it's just that they need to be efficient and at least they're giving you something. Now, the other element is going to be people like me online going, you must do this. This is what has worked for me. Note that part of the sentence. This has worked for me. So again, you need to remember that the care advice that somebody's going to be giving you, same thing I was talking about before about the experienced kind of plant grower versus somebody that's maybe just coming into the hobby, that works for them in their conditions, in their environment, and they also know how to pivot if something is not going to be happening. All of the millennials pivot! Sorry. That's forever drilled into all of our brains from Friends. Sorry, for my younger audience. Do a YouTube search at some point for pivot and Friends and you'll understand why. But yes, you can kind of pivot when you know what, if something isn't working, just like, okay, cool, I'll do this instead. But the average person, when they're maybe just starting off, or it doesn't have to be, and again, there is no shame. Do let us all know down below if you are beginners or people that have been doing this for a while, because I am a beginner when it comes to this specific plant, because guess what? I have never grown this plant. I don't know anybody who has grown this specific orchid. I'm going to be relying on information that I can find somewhere online, but pinch of salt, and be able to adjust if needed. Nothing is set in stone. And then you're probably going to get to the stage where it's the moment where things start to click. It's the moment that you start recognizing patterns within your plants. And this is one of those things that will just have to happen with time. And you're going to need to accept that sometimes you're going to have some losses or some failings, even if it's not total losses for plants, along the way. And I'm not saying this to be cruel, but it is something that we've all had to learn. It sounds horrible, but we all earned our stripes one way or another, basically. There is nothing that will teach you faster than failure. So, and that's when you start doing pattern recognition, because a lot of the times, say you've got this plant and it's growing really well and something goes horribly wrong, you followed all the rules, you've done all these things, you didn't take everything as if it was set in stone, but then you still failed. Generally speaking, if you've tried to rectify the situation for long enough and it still fails, most people, I would say, will kind of think of it, even after, say, this plant dies, I will be thinking about it for a few days afterwards, if not longer for some people, actually, because maybe there was sentimental attachment, or maybe you spent a lot of money on a plant, or maybe you were trying to challenge yourself, and I'm just like, why didn't I manage to keep this alive? You will think of it for a few days later, and then actually, with the benefit of hindsight, be able to go, oh, I see the pattern that I missed over those weeks or months that led to the demise of this plant, and just go, ah, that's probably what it was. It might not be, but at least you've then got a good kind of situation as to what is happening, because unfortunately it's human nature when you're in a panicked situation. I'm not saying that this would necessarily panic everybody, but when you're in that state of mind, when you're trying to fix things, sometimes you over adjust and you're not fully impartial because you're in that moment. Sometimes when you're no longer in that moment, which in this case would be the plant dying, is sometimes when you can make the most impartial judgment on the situation and just go, oh, that was it. That was a pattern. That's what this plant was trying to tell me. So it might be things like the leaves of the plant drooping before you water it. So think about for a moment something like a peace lily. And this is a plant that a lot of people will recommend to beginners. I don't always agree with that because of the kind of flopping nature of that plant. And the reason why I don't agree for it for beginners a lot of the time is because if you constantly doing that to the plant, it is in essence putting it in a stressful situation constantly, which then means that invariably, even if you've done everything right, because you've let it flop every single time, at some point that stress is going to become a bit too much and you might have issues with that specific plant. You need to also be paying attention to soil and their kind of drying pattern of the soil. So if some things are drying differently, or maybe one section of soil is drying faster than another section of soil, you need to start analyzing that a bit more and just go, oh, are most of the roots growing on one side? If that is the case, is that normal? Can I see what's causing it? Or is there a reason why that nothing is growing on the other side of the pot as well? And then see that, and then also pay attention to kind of the natural seasonal change in terms of how the pot and how the soil itself or the growing media is drying out, how fast, and also if you've had a quick change. So we've just come into like spring and all of a sudden we're getting brighter days and warmer days in here, and this is the first time, and you might have noticed a bit of a quick jump in the camera. My camera, and I hadn't even realized, it's got hot enough in here now that the camera overheated, so it switched itself off. And for the people that have been here for a while in the summer, you might not know this, but I actually have to have a cooling fan on the camera in order to film in here, because otherwise it just gets a bit too much for the camera. But yes, so it's things like that that you need to remember, like my soil. So there was a point to that story. My soil all of a sudden started drying a bit too quickly. That was the first sign to me that I'm just like, oh, it's a bit warmer in here, but maybe not so much. But the plants have noticed it and their soil is drying out faster. So that is being able to make that connection, and it's when everything clicks. And then also things like growth signals. So for instance, this struggling syngonium for a large period of time was very tall, it had loads of larger leaves, and now all of a sudden all I'm getting is tiny, tiny, kind of very juvenile looking leaves, and it's staying very compact. That to me is a signal that something might be happening, not necessarily a good something. Same thing would go that if all of a sudden your plant was growing really, really well and all of a sudden it just stopped, and there shouldn't be a reason to because you may be in the growing season, that is something that you should be paying attention to and maybe investigating a bit further and adjusting what you're doing in terms of care. And again, the rules not being set in stone, or you might be noticing things that are happening higher up in your plant. And this is the thing everybody's a bit worried about. My Esmeraldensa has some crispy leaves. These leaves have been on this plant for at least 3 or 4 years at this point. The brand new leaves are absolutely large, in charge, and fully green and healthy. That to me is a good signal. This was a false signal, which is why I wasn't worried about it. I've done it for long enough. But this is more the reality of what this plant is experiencing. But if conversely I was seeing that all of the new leaves were coming up mangled, or it wasn't growing, or it was coming up in yellowing, that is a signal that I need to be paying attention to. And unfortunately, we've all talked about this. Your mistakes are going to be your best teachers. I'm so sorry. This is like, it's interesting because everybody's just like, this is a nice stress-free hobby, and this is what a lot of people do to get away from their stresses. And actually the reality is, and between you and me, it can be a bit brutal. And I know that's a slight exaggeration, but like, if you think about the brutality, especially all of us have been doing this for a while, think about the brutality of the best way and the best lessons that we've learned is through death. That's how you get the green thumbs. There's a whole host of dead plants behind you. But unfortunately, mistakes are going to be your best teachers. That is going to be something that lands really, really quickly. So you've done something, good or bad, and the death or a plant really struggling is your consequence of not doing something right. I know it sounds horrible, and I know that like it can be something that's a hard pill to swallow at times, but it is a good teacher. It is a good teacher. Dealing with a bad situation is a good teacher. Like, I don't know how to put it into kind of more simple terms. So for instance, when I was doing my first degree, which was more the science degree, and I was doing human anatomy, I was in halls of residence at university when we all kind of were staying in the same kind of accommodation at university with a lot of the doctors and nurses and dentists and all of these things. And I know from them and from their experiences, they were just like, we know that when we finish academically from university is we've got all the rules, But we don't get through some of the truer learning until we're in hospitals and experiencing things, and they are learning the hard way too. When mistakes are made, or sometimes a rule isn't set in stone because what might work for 9 out of 10 patients, that one patient is going to be different, they then start thinking more flexibly and on their toes. And it is a hard pill to swallow. But if you think about most doctors, a lot of the times now you go and see a doctor, especially somebody who's been working for years, you almost have this implicit trust in them because you know it's not just their academic background that has got them there. It's that lived experience and those lived lessons where things go wrong and you're just like, I trust you a lot more now because I know that you are better for it, for all this. Same thing with plants. I know I went a bit dramatic there, but hopefully the example landed. So things like root rot lessons. So for instance, with this one, and this is something that I've known for a long time, and there's another video, I don't remember if that's going to be coming out first or this one's going to be coming out first, but this is a lesson that I did not learn well enough, is the fact that a lot of this soil, even though it was very, very chunky and airy, it had started to deteriorate and compact on itself, which then led to root rot. But that was a lesson that I've learned, obviously not well enough, because I'm still making the same mistake. This is to say as well, like even if you're first starting off, even if you've been doing this for a while, or even if you've been doing this for ages, we all still sometimes make the same mistakes. It's okay. But it's learning and moving on from it. And that then becomes something that, you know, I know this and I should have done this, but until I lose a few more important plants to me, I'm probably still not going to put it into my care rotation as often as I probably should. So still learning. And then things like light mistakes. And again, all of us are still learning with this. You could have a plant and you're just like, okay, I've put you in bad light. Okay, I'm not getting some of the red backs that I want on these leaves. Do I give you slightly better light? Oh, I over adjusted and now you're having crispy tips because you're too close to the light. I need to pull it further. You can see that it's an almost always evolving kind of learning from the mistakes as you're going along. And then making sure that you're using things like the right soil mixture for you, your plant, your care, and your conditions. Because, for instance, just because everybody's just like, you need to use a moisture-retaining soil for something like a calathea or a brayer plant, doesn't almost 100% mean that you need to definitely be doing that, because for a lot of us, we've realized that actually something like a very chunky soil mix will work really, really well for the calatheas. But that's something we've learned through trial and error. But in essence, the thing that I really want you to take away from this part of the video is that plant losses are normal. We all still go through losses to this day. And I know I keep asking my audience of people that have maybe been growing for a while, if you want to share again, shout out down below to tell a lot of the people that are maybe just starting off or have maybe been doing this for a year or two, how many plants have we all lost over the years? How many plants are we still probably going to lose in the following few years? It's fine. Making those mistakes is normal. It is part of it's not even part of just the process, it's part of the journey. That is part of the journey. And we also need to remember that plants don't actually read care labels. So the same exact plant, say for instance, these were two of the same plant, and I had one in here, in my conservatory with the conditions that exist here, and one in my living room, which is the room next door. Now, what's going to be the difference? Higher humidity in here, fluctuating temperatures in here, brighter light levels in here. Conversely, in my conservatory, in my living room, it's going to be darker by default because there's not glass that's happening above. It's going to have less humidity because I've got radiators in there. All of these things, the temperature is going to be more stable in there because I need to keep it more stable because it's a living space rather than the growing space that this has become. Same plant, same care instructions, different conditions and potentially different care, two different results. But then you need to start thinking about how you're going to learn how to read some of these signs. So you might get drooping leaves, crisping leaves. What does that mean? What does that mean for that specific plant? Because you might look at, and I'll bring the example of the peace lily again. You might see a peace lily that literally looks like it's about to die and everything's flopped down to the bottom. That is normal for that plant. Remember this? This is where some of the research, and I know some of it might be contradicting, but try to see if there's consistencies between everybody. That is going to be unique to that plant. If you leave every other plant to get to the same stage the peace lily or a Fittonia would do, which is so dramatic and the flopping down, you're going to probably run into some problems. So adjust accordingly. Leaf issues are going to show you different things, the crispiness, the floppiness, the yellowiness. I'm not going to go through all of it here because that could be a whole video within itself. But those are the lessons you're going to have to learn that the leaves are going to tell you. Same thing goes for light and light stress we were talking about before. So if a plant is supposed to have red backs, I know after years now that it might need slightly, the lighting might be the issue. So is it getting too much light and is it burning, or is it getting too little light and maybe the plant isn't growing as fast, or maybe not getting as much of the physiological kind of traits that I'm looking from it, and it's just adjusting accordingly. And then obviously something that we all learn, especially quite early on, is if a plant is root bound. If a plant is root bound, maybe don't rush to repot it super quickly, especially if you're just learning how to deal with plants. Sometimes actually slightly more root bound plants, and I know people will come for me in the comments, are slightly more forgiving than somebody who's constantly repotting. But again, this is a lesson that we all have to learn on our own. And I know people that are just like, I knew I shouldn't have repotted it as often as it did, but I still did it, and that plant eventually died. We know things. We've learned that lesson. Obviously not well enough, and we still make the same mistakes. It's fine. It will happen. And remember to give yourself permission to experiment. I think a lot of people forget that part of the joy of this, and I know a lot of people have made this comment on recent videos, people have forgotten the fun of experimenting. Try different soils, try different methods of growing, try different light levels, try less water, more water, all of these things. If you're stuck constantly on the rules, that notion that they are set in stone becomes a thing that you're just like, I don't want to veer too much. Why would I do this? And I'll give you very specific examples. And I will bring back the examples of Calatheas because this is the one thing that tends to stress a lot of people out, both newbies and people that have been seasoned growers for a while. I have heard it all from a lot of you actually, and it's really interesting. It's one of those really divisive kind of genuses of plants, and I know some of them are now Gopertias and all of these things, but think prayer plants generally. I cannot tell you because I've also had it in DMs, I've had it in comments of videos, and I've been doing this for a few years now, so I have literally heard it all. And this will prove to you that there is no one rule for it all. Some people are growing Calatheas in closed vessels. Some people, successfully by the way, these are all successfully. In closed vessels, no drainage. Some people are growing it in semi-hydro and letting it dry out between waterings successfully. Some people have got semi-hydro and keeping all the soil substrate in, which you're not meant to do. Again, another rule that is not hard and fast. And then putting the semi-hydro solution around it, and they're happy. You've then got people like me that I'm growing it in something entirely different to what the normal advice is, which is very like anthurium soil mix. I'm curious to maybe experiment. This is maybe an experiment that I do of trying to grow a Calathea in something as airy as an orchid bark, just orchid bark, and I want to see what's going to happen. But if you can see that all of these different people that have had different experience, same people that have not had, not giving it a lot of light. Some people have given it more light than people would suggest. Some people don't water as frequently. Some people watering all the time. Some people are growing them in almost fully in water. Like you can see how people have veered away from the standard advice that you might get for a Calathea, and every single one of those individuals, multiples for each one of these examples, by the way, it's not just one person that's had success with this one time, I'll come back to say, but I do it this way and it's worked for me. Great. That is the most important thing. But you know what all of those people had in common? They all experimented. They just went, pah, I don't want to go with that rule. I'm going to try my own thing and see if it works. And lo and behold, some of them worked. All of those examples that I've given you. Yes, with experimenting, you're going to have failures as well, but that is part of the joy, and again, is part of the journey. So yeah, that example that I was just giving you now with all those different kind of scenarios, adjusting watering, adjusting substrates, adjusting lighting, all of these things, they're your experiments to have. Try something different. Don't get bound by the rules of that specific plant or even plant type. Because I can tell you there's a lot of people that are just like, all monsteras like this. And I'm just like, My humblest of opinion, not all monsteras like the same thing, same way that not all philodendrons like the same thing, same things that not all calatheas, gopertias, ferns, they don't all like the same thing. You need to do some experimenting, because if the kind of rules that you're finding generally are all very generic, they're not going to apply to everything. So some of my top tips and advice, rather than care rules for people that are just starting off, or even people that are not just starting off, because as I said, we're all constantly learning. Pay attention to your plant more than you water your plant. Let that sink in for a moment. Pay attention to your plant more than you water your plant. In essence, observe it. Observe it more than you would water it, basically. That should give you a moment for pause and just go, oh yeah, huh, yeah. Because we all get very mechanical with our kind of watering jugs and just go, oh yes, I'm gonna water this and I'm gonna water this, and today is the day that I need to water this, and I'm like, stop, breathe, and observe. Don't panic over mistakes. Like, this is the second or third Anthurium forgetii that I'm trying to grow. They all end up back into a stump. But, and I was getting rid of, to get rid of this entirely and just go, I can't grow this plant, it's fine. It's still got happy roots that are growing there, and it's annoying because it did actually have a growth point for my sins that was happening, and I was about to get a leaf, and as it was unfurling, I got a slug that ate it. Cue me and a whole bunch of expletives the next morning when I discovered that. And the most important bit of advice that I can give you is plants are resilient. Again, for the people that have been doing this for a while, shout out down below how many times a plant has surprised you because you constantly think it's on the brink of death and it rebounds or it comes back and it does better. I know it doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. It just goes to show that plants are more resilient than we give them credit for. And as a bit of a final thought, and I know this might be a bleak one, but every single experienced person out there, whether or not they'll admit it or not, in terms of plant care, house plants, garden plants, vegetable growing, all of these things, they are successful and experienced through what? Plant deaths. So it is fine. It will happen even if it's not plant deaths. A lot of us have had some busted looking plants over the while. That's it. I'm not just saying us in the houseplant world. I'm talking about gardeners, people that are growing vegetables, people that have been doing this as professions for years. I talk to a lot of people that are professional botanists, gardeners, landscapers, all of these things, and they all have the same stories of being humbled by situations of plants where they either didn't know, didn't have any experience, or they got humbled that way, or plants that they thought they knew what they were doing because they've had experience of it, and it's that one or two plants humbled them still to this day. It is, everybody that I know hates the expression green thumb, but if you really want to use it, that's how you earn your green thumb. Through a lot of black death behind you. Corpses of plants behind you. But it does happen. It is part of the journey. Don't be too rough on yourself. And remember, we're doing this for fun. Enjoy it. Experiment. Have fun. Which is why we all got into this in the first place. But yes, hopefully you've all enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon. And I truly, truly hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.